Let's move away from politics slightly and bring you this now. Eskom has announced the appointment of Priscillah Mabelane as the chairperson of the National Transmission Company. This is another entity that will oversee the unbundling of the power utility into 3 parts. The company has already been given a green light by the National Energy Regulator of South Africa. Let's get you some insights on whether the process of unbundling Eskom is happening as swiftly as it should and whether, in fact, it will indeed solve the many problems we face with the national power supplier. Energy analyst Chris Yelland joins us now via our telephone line. And Chris, it's great to have you on the program as always. Thanks for making time this Sunday morning. Is Priscillah the right person for the job?
Well, Priscilla's got a long history in liquid fuels, first at BP and then at Sasol, where she was the vice president, I think, responsible for energy resources. So she's very experienced in the energy sector. I think less experienced perhaps in the electricity sector itself. I think we'll have to wait and see. And I think, the appointment of the new board of the National Transmission Company of South Africa is long overdue. We've been waiting for this for more than a year, so better late than never. And thank goodness this transmission grid company is finally, I hope, going to become operational.
Yeah, and as expected, there are kind of questions that are coming up when Kgosi Ramokgopa was appointed electricity minister, questions around whether or not this team will have the right support. I mean, we know there are people in and around Eskom who have an invested interest in keeping the status quo going, despite the great cost that it comes at for the country.
Yeah, I think you're right, that ideologically this is contested. But I think government is fairly committed to the restructuring, in fact, very committed to the restructuring of Eskom, the unbundling of Eskom, and the creation of an independent national grid company. And we see this through the bill that is currently going through Parliament called the Electricity Regulation Act Amendment Bill. This is setting the legal and regulatory framework for the unbundled electricity supply industry, for the establishment of the National Transmission Grid Company, for the creation of a competitive and unbundled and diversified generation sector, and for the establishment of an independent system operator, independent market operator, and an electricity market. So these are very important steps, I think, in the reform of this electricity supply industry. But it's not a fait accompli yet. The bill still has to go to Parliament, and it's highly contested. And the previous so-called ITSMO bill, the Independent Transmission System and Market Operator bill that went before Parliament after being approved by the Cabinet some years ago, was then withdrawn. And not because of, opposition from the opposition parties, but because even within the ruling party in the ANC, they were not on the same page, and it was ideologically contested, and it was withdrawn. So this is the second attempt. It hasn't gone yet through Parliament. We have an election coming up next, this year, and we'll have to see how this plays out.
Yeah, we've had double-speak, so to speak, amongst very senior members of government before about whether or not this country should even be relying, for instance, on renewable energy. So your point certainly well made insofar as that is concerned. Is it still too early to speak about timelines here, Chris? I mean, you've already spoken about how this particular appointment is just way overdue, but there are also a number of hurdles to cross or get over before the work that is meant to be done by this team finally has any material outcome on the ground, so to speak.
Yeah, look, it's very hard to put timelines to this, especially with this election coming up. The whole thing could be scuppered, actually, in the end. I think that's a low probability. I think there's a good probability that it will indeed go through. But there's a chance that it won't. And it could be scuppered as it was before. So it's hard to be definitive about timelines, but I would say, keeping in mind the election that is coming up and the fact that decision-making, during this time is difficult. In fact, the parliamentary process is closed for a period, and then the new administration will have to come in and settle down, get its feet on the ground. I would hope that this ERA amendment bill will be passed by the end of this year, which is very late and too slow and doesn't recognize the importance of this, I think, to the whole process. Look, the whole restructuring of Eskom is a longer-term, project. It's not something that's going to happen tomorrow. But if we don't start now, we're not going to be ready in the medium term. So we have to, get stuck in with short-term options, and that is like bringing on renewable rooftop solar PV and battery energy storage, medium solutions, that is a larger scale renewable energy, public procurements from the private sector, wheeling and trading of electricity, and then longer-term projects, which are the public procurement program, which are very slow and bureaucratic. But while all of that is in progress, we need to be concurrently working on the restructuring of the electricity supply industry. If we don't, we are going to have very, very hard times ahead. And we've seen this before. When policy positions were suddenly changed, in 2008, and it decided to build Medupi and Kusile, these were knee-jerk reactions, the wrong decisions that have actually resulted in bringing Eskom to its very knees. Eskom is where it is today because of wrong decisions about mega projects that went wrong and were not executed properly, and they were fundamentally wrong decisions. So, but those were knee-jerk reactions when there was an about-turn in government policy. If we do an we've been talking about the restructuring of Eskom since 1998, the government white paper of energy policy, which is the official policy to this very day, the restructuring and unbundling of Eskom. If we do not do it, we're going to go back, and if we do an about-turn, we're going to have very hard times ahead.
Sure. Difficult to think of times that are harder than the ones that we're in now, but loud and clear. Chris Yelland, energy analyst, speaking to us via our telephone line. As always, thanks very much indeed.